Joining us today is a former rugby player for Ireland and the Lions, regarded as one of the best players in the history of the game. Brian O'Driscoll captained the Irish national team from 2003 to 2012. He has scored more tries than any player in the Six Nations and is the fourth most capped Rugby Union player in history. Since retirement, he has worked as a pundit for the likes of BT and ITV. Thank you for joining us today, Brian.
Thanks for having me, Harry. It's been in the offing for a while. Unfortunately, we had to wait for lockdown to finally eventually get to chat, but better late than never.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to start by talking about your first introduction to rugby. You came from a strong rugby family with your father having played for Ireland, but is it true you started out playing Gaelic football?
Yeah, it was all Gaelic football from as young as I can kind of remember, 5, 6 years of age. And then playing soccer as well so I didn't touch a rugby ball until I was 12. It was, the part of Dublin that I grew up in, the focus with all my friends was about Gaelic football. We had a park across the road. It's where we played all our games. And then a mixture of that and soccer in school until I ended up going across the other side of the city to Blackrock College and picked up rugby as a 12-year-old there. So yeah, I guess my dad knew the time would come to pick up rugby. There was no rush to get into it. A little bit like I am with my own little fella. If he, ball sports of any kind are good team sports, and that's the encouragement at the moment. So yeah, I think he kind of knew what he was doing, did my old man.
Hmm. Okay, and a lot of people talk about the mythology of Brian O'Driscoll and will assume that you kind of waltzed through schoolboy rugby. But would you agree you had to work hard for your place at Blackrock?
Well, I didn't get my place for large parts of my school career. In Ireland, there's a huge focus at two levels at under 15s called the Junior Cup team and your final year, under 18, your Senior Cup team. And schools rugby is it's enormous. At Junior Senior Cup games, you could get 6, 7, 8,000 people coming to watch you. Obviously, the schools get half days, pour into the stands down in Donnybrook, and you've got ex pupils coming in, lots of parents. So, it's a huge focus of the school system. I think that's why we've had a lot of success in integrating through from school into academy systems in Ireland, because there's such a strong schools game here. But it was tricky for me initially. I was as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, I played second row for the first trial game I ever played in, and I would have been the smallest on the pitch, and they realized pretty quickly the second row wasn't my position. Got the ball, ran past a few people, said, all right, out onto the wing with you. And then I slowly moved my way into, to 10 and to scrum half. And then at Junior Cup level, I made the bench for our Junior Cup team. Sat on the bench, didn't come on in a final loss. And then I made the team a year early when I was 17, and then got dropped for the semi-final and didn't play the semi-final. I made it the semi-final or final, and then managed to play my final year. And I think I kind of grew with confidence a little bit that year. I sized up a bit, and I started making some representative teams, and it kind of happened pretty quickly for me thereafter. So yeah, it wasn't a walk in the park by any stretch of the imagination. It's something I get asked a lot about by, parents of kids, aspiring kids to be professional rugby players, what were your experiences like at school? Because it's a good story to come from not achieving at an underage level to then, within 2 years of being out of school, I was a captain to national.
And you went to Blackrock College, as you say, which can name dozens of Irish internationals among its alumni. Can you just talk a bit about why you think the Leinster school system particularly seems to produce this endless conveyor belt of talent?
Yeah, I think it's. I was part of probably one of the first few years of the academy. It was known as the Foundation back in those days, and it was an international, or it was a national piece, I should say. So basically, if you made the provincial setup, or if you made the Irish schools around that time, you automatically got into the foundation, whereas now it's incredibly hard to get into the provincial academy systems, particularly in Leinster. Only the top 4 or 5 players that might make the Irish schoolboys will make their way into the academy. There's sub academies and there's feeders into sub academies as well. It's an incredible system that they've put in place. And obviously we're only 25 years since the advent of professionalism, and we're still learning an awful lot. And I think when you offer rugby as a career option, a genuine career option to aspiring athletes coming out of school, it's what a carrot it is. So the focus begins so young for them. Where, from my point of view, I never thought I was going to come out of school and be a professional rugby player. I guess I wanted to play for Ireland, but I thought I'd have to go to college, and work was definitely on my radar. And then all of a sudden, I fell into it. Whereas kids are looking at 13, and you ask them what you want to be. When I want to be a fireman or a police officer or a vet, they're a rugby player, and that's it. And it's like the version of football in the UK. Rugby is that focus here. So the professionalism of, as 13, 14-year-olds taking supplementation, in the gym, because they don't want to miss the jump on all their age grade. And it's I think it's a great thing and a negative at the same time, because these are just young kids and want them to enjoy their teenage years. But at the same time, you want to give themselves the best opportunity to progress into something they want to do in later life. So the system is a real credit to the IRFU, the Irish Union, but also to the provincial setups, because their ability to earmark talent well in advance of it coming to fruition is pretty exceptional. And they put these programs in place for 15, 16-year-olds to try and get the most out of the talent and the ability. And when you earmark them that early, of course, there's going to be a fall off. But then when you sieve those players through, you get the cream of the crop. And that's why you only get 4 or 5 into the provincial setup each year.
And there have been some reports recently of steroid use in South African schoolboy rugby. Do you think that the Leinster schools model ever has a danger of straying too far, and that there should be more of a focus on enjoyment over competitiveness ever?
Well, I've been not outspoken, but when I've been asked about it, I absolutely think we shouldn't think there's no threat of it in Ireland. If it's in South Africa, it's well documented in the Craven Week that multiple players have tested positive, and we shouldn't rule ourselves out in any shape or form that temptation won't be there. I do believe that there should be testing at schoolboy level, because they're the danger years when you look at 14, 15-year-olds who are being left behind in some capacity in strength or size. Of course, with money on offer, there's going to be a temptation there. And I don't understand why that hasn't been the case. Perhaps it'll change in the coming years, but we've got to make sure that we're dealing with the circumstances that we find ourselves in as best we can. And I think by having very, very stringent laws when players are caught, I think that's the only way to discourage it happening in the future. And I'm for, close on lifetime bans or very extended periods for younger players who make a very silly error as a child or as a teenager, because you've got to discourage future generations from doing it.
And you made your Ireland debut against Australia age 20 before even playing for Leinster. Maybe with the exception of the likes of Jordan Larmour, this exposure at a young age is becoming quite rare in the modern game. Do you think it's a good thing?
Yeah, listen, there's more competition for places now. It's more difficult for a 19, 20-year-old to break into the national setup, such as the competition for places. It was a bit of a different time back in '99. It was a unique situation, of course, to play for the national team before my provincial side. But I think nowadays, if a player is breaking through at 2021, they are a real talent, because to shine through and have that capability and that confidence at such a young age, with the competition for places that are now out there, it speaks volumes for how good this individual must be and how they're there to stay the course. So very few 21-year-olds fluke their way into getting a cap. It's because they've been highlighted from a very young age and earmarked as a potential international. And then it's all about taking your opportunity. It doesn't matter how it comes. It's through lack of form somewhere, through injury to somebody else. But when you're catapulted into the environment, you don't get too many first chances. So you take it. And then if you're the man in possession and you're going well, it's very hard to be dropped.
And with the professional era and its emphasis on strength and conditioning, rugby players have gotten a lot bigger in recent years. I think you described that pre-2007 World Cup, you felt more like weightlifters than rugby players. Do you think there is too much emphasis on size over skill in the game today? You spoke about having to bulk up for your last year of school.
I think the cycle's coming back around, and that's the game. It rose in cycles. There's such a huge focus on attack and then defense and then the kicking game and physicality. And I think you look at the more modern, yes, there's big players out there, but you look now at how lean a lot of players and the successful teams have gotten. You take the final of the European Cup last year, Saracens have a huge pack, but they're not carrying any extra weight. They are, very low body percentage, fat percentage. And likewise Leinster, some of the guys that I would have played with, I've never seen them so trim. A guy like Rob Kearney playing at fullback, playing at 90 kilos. He would never be 90 kilos in the time that I played with him. But the necessity of the game plan has forced him to drop that weight and that extra training and focus on aerobic and anaerobic fitness rather than size is what differentiates them as a team and has put them in at the business end of the season the last number of years. And I would say the same about Saracens. So I think it's a positive that there's more of a focus on the rugby player rather than the athlete. And I think that's where we need to continue going, because it is a game for all shapes and sizes, and we want to continue encouraging that. We don't want to stop the 5'7", 5'8", 10.5, 11 stone scrum half from picking up the game because it's a game for giants. Far from it. I think you can be every shape and size, and you can, particularly with now the high tackle framework and how players are going to have to reduce their tackle heights. I think that all the more brings in those fast, nippy players that have an ability to beat people in phone boxes. Cheslin Colby, the World Cup winner with South Africa, is a perfect example of that. 5'9", and maybe 12 stone, but absolutely impossible to defend. I was glad I was just interviewing him last year, not playing against him.
And as you mentioned, one of the more topical issues in modern rugby surrounds tackle height. I'm sure you're tired of talking about that 2005 tackle against New Zealand, but I noticed Will Greenwood tweeted recently about a collision you had with Rousseau playing for the Lions. Do you think we need more of an emphasis on improving tackle technique, particularly for younger players?
Yeah, I think it's a really important starting point at grassroots to understand. First of all, the focus is about tackling low, and I talked to my son about it. He doesn't play team rugby, but we play out in the back garden, and about body height, because I said, I'm a lot bigger than you. And what's the only way of getting me down is by tackling me below the knee and getting my two legs together. And that age-old adage of the bigger they are, the harder they fall. I don't care who you are, but if you get hit hard enough below the knee height and you get an arm wrap, no player can move anywhere. So I think that's got to be a focus for younger players. And then as they progress throughout the age groups and into professional rugby, they can develop different types of tackle techniques. But there's no doubt that we are trying to reduce tackle heights because of the huge topic that is concussion at the moment. And I think World Rugby are going, making lots of positive steps about trying to reduce those numbers down. And there's naturally going to be some concussions in the game. It's a collision sport. but it's about trying to get hold of it. And lots of good work has gone on in the past, and there's some more still to go, but I think we're going in the right direction.
And changing tack slightly, you captained Ireland for most of your career, as well as captaining the Lions in 2005. But you've also mentioned in the past you weren't necessarily an instinctive public speaker. What was your leadership style like? And more specifically, did you enjoy captaincy?
I probably didn't really enjoy captaincy at the start. I think it was such a huge honour to be captain of Ireland that I couldn't turn it down. But I was no natural leader for sure. Like the expectation of being out front and centre, being a spokesperson for everyone, probably having to change your behaviour a little bit because you were in the public eye a little bit more, and that you represented the team both on and off the field. Finding myself, I tell you, the most nerve-wracking part was team meetings when it was just me and the focus was on my delivery of message. So for me, the easiest way to lead was trying to be the best player at training and be the best player on the pitch and roll my sleeves up and show that I was there, trying to be there for the hard track, but also there for the trenches as well. And I think leadership, a lot is talked about leadership with what you say. I think leadership is very much about the actions that you partake in along with your team. If you're not willing to get stuck in along with everyone else, where's the message there? Where's the direction to give your team? I've always been an action sort of leader, and then you progressively develop the other parts to the leadership expectation, and that's a never-ending piece. You always are honing and developing new skills, and I think that's the appetite for trying to become a better leader.
And to what extent did your leadership style ever evolve and reflect the coaches you played under, or was that something you kept separate?
I think it's probably something separate. One thing I did as a leader, I looked at all the different leaders that I had been under. When you become captain of Ireland at 23, you've limited experience. So I look back to the captains that I'd been under, Keith Wood with Ireland, Martin Johnson, the Lions, even school captains, good pal of mine, Kieran Scally, that would have been a captain in school that I would have respected as a friend and as a leader on the pitch. So trying to steal different components and amalgamate them into your style. If you're not trying to plagiarize somebody else in some way or take some aspects from them, you're not trying hard enough. Because for me, when I looked at someone, I said, that was a really good trait that I want part of my own. And then, you've after a while, you decipher exactly what it is your style becomes. So, it was, even to the time that the captaincy was taken away from me. Leadership doesn't change just because you're not captain anymore. In fact, sometimes there's even more of an onus on you to take the pressure off the actual captain and being a voice and trying to continue to be the best player and the best trainer and be a person in the environment, to be accessible and to give small messaging on behalf of captains. So it's not just about being the guy with an armband or the guy that's out front and center in press conferences. Leadership, once it becomes part of you, I think it never leaves you.
And how was your experience? I know the tour was cut slightly short for you, but how was your experience of captaining the Lions and trying to bring together players from the different countries? And was that ever difficult? And did you manage to gel?
Yeah, it was difficult. It was an ill-fated tour down to New Zealand. We were going to have our work cut out against a phenomenal All Black team at the time. We probably didn't help ourselves with certain things. We had huge numbers on the tour. The Lions is built on an amateur ethos of playing Saturday, backing up Wednesday. And we didn't have that. We roomed on our own. There were 43 or 4 players on tour. We had 2 different coaching tickets. In fact, one of my teammates, Dennis Hickey, I only trained with him once in the course of the whole tour. So how are you meant to gel aside of of talented players, but guys that don't know one another. And so I think we learned a huge amount from that. I would have said I made a lot of mistakes and learned a lot myself as captain on that trip. And very frustrating that my tour was taken away from me within the first minute of the first test. But whether I played or not, I wasn't going to change the landscape of how that test series went. We were up against it, and I guess we in future tours we learned a lot of messages from that.
And your autobiography mentions how 2008 was a tough time for you on a personal level. Just how important is the mental and psychological side of the sport in terms of both injury recovery and off the field factors that the fans don't necessarily see that can impact your performance?
Yeah, well, you're still human, aren't you? You still have the same emotions that everybody. People think at times you're robotic and you just go, because you're front and center and because you get paid well, that there's meant to be no emotion involved. Emotion's a huge part of sport, and take away whatever's going on off the pitch, even the small things about carrying injuries, having a little niggle, that you're fighting with, and for probably the last 5, 6, 7 years of your career, you're never playing 100% fit, so you're always feeling something, and if that is taking up a lot of your brain capacity, it's very hard to focus on the other part of your game. And I've seen lots of players that I didn't know had an injury, but I knew watching them that they're not 100% right because their game fell apart. And then, all the other aspects, whatever's going on in your private life, whatever struggles you might be having. I think there's so much more of a focus now on mental health than there was when I played, about lots of time spent away from family and friends. Some people really struggle with that. So, I think the mental side of the game is huge. It's, I think it's 85, 90% mental, and then that 15% of being physically fit to be able to compete with everybody else is what differentiates the very best from the good.
And you've described how you had a bit of a crisis of confidence around that 2008 time. Can you talk a bit about how watching YouTube videos actually helped you on that?
Yeah, I spoke to a sports psychologist for the first time. I thought they were a bit wishy-washy, to be honest. I'd been in environments where sports psychologists spoke to the team at large, and it felt a bit like a classroom where he's asking questions and people are putting their hand up and giving answers. And like, yeah, I like that, but that's not exactly what I'm looking for. I was like, we'll get there eventually, but that's not real. How are we all collectively meant to buy into that? So I think sports psychology is a very personal thing, and I went and spoke to a guy, an ex-Gaelic footballer called Enda McNulty, and he just got me answering some really simple questions. First of all, had I ceased to be the athlete that I was in the previous 7, 8, 9 years? And I said no. He said, is your nutrition and hydration at 100%? Are you sleeping at 100%? I said no, I could make an improvement on that. Are you working harder on as hard on your skills as you ever have? I said, well, I could probably push it a bit more. And then he told me a great line, and it's something that I use a lot, is rather than focusing on your weaknesses, focus on what you're really strong at and make yourself truly world-class at it. And so I did that with a couple of attributes in my game that I really put a huge amount of focus on wanting to be able to deliver, as best I could. And thankfully that following year, all of that came together. What it does do is it doesn't guarantee success, but it gives you a better opportunity of achieving higher standards by putting all those little 1% and 2%ers together. So thankfully all the stars aligned and we had some success the following year, and I'm able to look back and realize the further sacrifices, the little extra efforts came good for me.
And one of those attributes that you have is was undoubtedly an exceptional finishing ability as Ireland's highest ever try scorer. And I remember being at Croke Park for the famous intercept against Munster in 2009. But is there any one try in particular that stands out in your memory as a favourite or a defining moment?
I like that one. I like that one a lot. I actually did a classic commentary the other day from this desk, calling over that game with BT Sport, and it was Nick Mullins, the lead comms, was in his house in London, and I was doing it here, and we were, technology these days is incredible, where you're able to record both voices, and then even if we did interrupt or talk over one another, the post edit will be able to finesse it. So I'm looking forward to hearing that in the coming days. But I do love looking back on that intercept. I think obviously because it was Munster, because they hurt us so much in 3 years previously in 06 in the semi-final, because it was thrown by my good friend Ron O'Gara as well. And because when I turned around, I didn't see Doug Howlett chasing me, and I only saw Rog, and I thought third gear will be grand here. So yeah, I do look back on that one. I think the Lions try in 01 is a biggie for me as well. Even though we didn't win the series, we won that game. So yeah, those two are probably good ones because of the importance of them as well.
And despite all these fantastic moments in the past, you've mentioned that any sportsman who lives without self-doubt must be deluded. Do you think that doubt can ever be a motivator to push you to excel, or is doubt an adversity to overcome in and of itself?
No, I think we can look at it both ways. But I would look on doubt as something that I can't let fester. And I'm a big believer that if I dwell and stew in disappointment and negativity and sadness, then it will breed, and it will allow itself to completely own me. And so on the flip of that, I'm someone that tries to feed off positivity. And listen, during this lockdown, I've had bad days, and my wife will be testament to that. And you have a good one and a bad one, but it's about trying to find some good to latch onto, because there's no doubt positivity breeds positivity. And the flip to that is negativity breeds negativity. So the doubt aspect, I think it's good because it makes sure you don't get complacent. But it also gives you an opportunity to try and park something where there's doubt. You don't have to hit rock bottom, but you have to realize, okay, I need to put a stop to that, and I need to be able to grow my positivity from this level, and not get back, and not allow myself get back down there. And that comes from hard work and thinking about things a little bit more, and just giving a bit more focus and a bit more time. And it's small little wins. For as a rugby player, it's about extra stretching. It's about playing things over in your mind a little bit, about extra analysis, about more core work when somebody else is watching telly or doing Xbox. I was going in on my days off to make sure that I knew I was doing things that others weren't. And I think you get a little kick from that as well. And just pushing the boundaries a little bit as to, it's one thing having talent, but hard work on top of talent is a pretty sick marriage.
And when Chris Robshaw came to the Union last year, he was asked whether there were any players he wasn't so fond of facing. And he mentioned remembering trying to tackle Sebastian Chabal and then waking up in the changing room. Did you have any players who were like that for you, who you didn't fancy playing as much?
I played against Jonah Lomu, so he wasn't overly easy to take down. There's guys that I've been hit by before that I thought, I didn't think it was all over, but as close as I have felt to impossible pain. I got hit by Scott Williams, the Welsh centre, in my final season, and he hit me square in the sternum, and he broke his collarbone. And if he had hit me anywhere other than in my central plane, either ribs would have smashed on either side. The collision was so huge. We wear these GPS units, and it recorded like an equivalent G-force of 26, and the highest I would have had prior to that would have been 18. So it was, aligned to kind of a medium-sized car crash, and with no padding there. In fact, the funny thing was the impact on my backside. The bruise was so big from the force I hit the ground. He had hit me so hard. So I look back and get asked, what was the hardest shot you've ever taken? And undoubtedly that was it. I was able to recover from it and play on, and he broke his collarbone, but I was lucky on that occasion. But what a great shot it was! I have to say, we had a word afterwards, and I said that was quite exceptional. And I love that as well. If you go and break, something, you're 100% committed to it. And I just have respect for people that are that committed to things.
And something I've always wondered through the European Cup wins in 2009, 11, 12, how in such a physically demanding sport do you lift yourselves to go from a European final to a domestic final in a matter of days? And how do you maintain that aggression and intensity that you need to win?
It's hard. It's very hard. In fact, I don't think in my time we ever managed to double. I think we won a European Challenge Cup in 2013, and then won the league the following week. But that's different. I think there's to go European Cup. We played in 3 finals in my time, and twice we had a domestic double to go for, and we lost it on 2 occasions. It's just such a hard thing to get yourself up for emotionally and physically, week on week, when you're that deep into the season. And you look over the history of time, in England, Leicester and Wasps have done it. Toulon, I think, are the only ones to have done it in France. And I think Leinster have done it now since I retired a couple of seasons ago. When they won the European Cup, they managed to win the domestic double as well. But that just shows, to come down from the high of success to then build yourself back up is a very difficult thing. And it talks a lot about the mental side of the game, because physically, lots of teams at that stage are in great shape, but it's the mental side of the game that is so key to success.
On that topic of mentality, you played for Ireland at several World Cups. Do you think there's a particular reason why Ireland have struggled historically in the tournament, or perhaps haven't lived up to potential?
Well, definitely the latter part. We haven't lived up to potential. We'd great opportunities. I think in 99 for me, so I was at four World Cups. 99, I was very new into the squad. I'd only 3 caps before getting in there. And a real shock against Argentina to go out of that. But yeah, from my point of view, as much as I was disappointed, I felt as though there'd be other chances. Really enjoyed the World Cup in 2003. Managed to get to a quarter-final, but were badly beaten by a miles better French team. 2007, we were in great shape coming off the back of the Six Nations. We should have won the Grand Slam, but we got our training regime wrong. Collectively and personally, I was way too big, way too much of a focus on getting big. So, we limped out of that, and that was kind of a big embarrassment. And then a great opportunity in 2011 to beating Australia in the pool, and then not really firing a shot against a pretty good Welsh team in that tournament was a really difficult one to take, because I knew that was going to be my last World Cup. So looking back I think there's a monkey on our backs, and once we get beyond one quarter final into a semi-final, I think the next one won't be as difficult. It is about breaking the seal, but there's a psychology to that, and we just can't get there at the moment. And it's so frustrating that you have to wait 4 years on the cycle. It does build, it ratchets up the pressure, because you don't get a chance the following year or in 2 years' time, that you've got to wait a full cycle again. And lots of players mightn't be there, so that raises the intensity and the expectation. And you look at the Irish team of the last 2 years, getting to number 1 for a couple of weeks in the world, beating the All Blacks, beating every team in the world, and then not managing to peak for the World Cup is such a frustration, but it's the reality. Until we get there, we'll have to take all the abuse that comes with it.
Mm. And one Ireland team that definitely did live up to potential was the 2009 Grand Slam winning team, where you played with the likes of O'Gara and O'Connell. There's always been that rivalry between Munster and Leinster, but what was the dynamic like of that national setup? I know you made a documentary about the All-Ireland dynamic as well, shoulder to shoulder. So could you maybe talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So first of all, I think, relations were pretty good. Obviously, at times we were very envious for a few years where Munster were getting to, numerous semi-finals and finals of Europe. They managed to win in 06 and 08 before we had any. They were the standard bearers in Europe for a number of years until, I suppose, we came and took that off them in 09. But I think the desire was driven from a lot of their success as well. In that game in 09, we had nowhere to go if we didn't win that game, and playing scared is can be a pretty positive thing. So, and then it's a case of making sure that rivalry stays intact. I still look at those Munster games and I want to win badly. I want Leinster to win. It's ingrained in us. And I'm sure likewise, those players that have retired think similarly. We had great rivalries, but we were able to park that and see the bigger picture of the collective of Ireland and how we were able to pull together. If you don't buy into that, you've no chance of success. So it's a bit like the Lions. If you don't park your national allegiance at the door, you don't have any hope of trying to turn things around in a 5 or 6 week period against one of the best teams in the world. And the same could be said for provincial rivalries being parked at the national door. With regard to the documentary, that was really just a piece talking about Irish rugby team staying together as one throughout a very difficult period in Irish history in the 60s, 70s, 80s in particular, and a bit through the 90s with the Troubles. What was going on behind the scenes? An opportunity to go back and speak to a number of players that played for Ireland, that stayed loyal to the Irish cause during that time when threats were made on lives, where some players were caught up in bombs, and it was really eye-opening from my perspective to understand the lengths that they went to play for their country, and a newfound admiration I had towards them for putting themselves at risk just to get an opportunity to pull on the green jersey. So it was a very enjoyable piece. Something that we co-produced with a production company that myself and my BT colleague Craig Doyle set up. And now we're just before the lockdown, we were just embarking on our second documentary that only managed to film one day before it was shut down. So hopefully we won't have to wait too long to start that again.
And since retiring, you've been involved as an analyst with the likes of BT and ITV. How did you find that progression to punditry? And do you have any aspirations to migration to coaching later?
Well, the analysis part is it's enjoyable. There's an aspect of coaching in that, where you're coaching the audience at home and trying to give them a little bit of insight as to what they're looking at. And was it Bill McLaren said, the late Bill McLaren said, don't tell them what they're seeing, tell them why they're seeing it. And people can see the pictures. No point in just recalling. And then he pops a pass and steps inside them. They know that. They're watching that. So it's about, why has that happened? What event has happened over the course or sequence of that play to be able to isolate a defender, or who's been held in a ruck, or who's been held down on the ground, or what's the mismatch? That's the messaging that we're there to be able to add a little bit of value. And I quite enjoy, particularly with BT Sport, the opportunity of doing the demos, the pitch demos in our studio, where we can bring teams in and literally walk through step by step to inform the viewer at home exactly why something happens and the sequence of events that needs to transpire for something to have a positive effect. So I quite enjoy that side of things. It's difficult at the start being critical of ex-teammates. There's a few of them that can't retire quick enough, so I can be truly honest. I've never wanted to be scathing. There's no need for it, and never get personal. Never look at anything other than their performance on the field, because that's all I'm there for. And I think it's, as a player, I never had an issue if someone kept it legitimately to my actions on the field. It's when people started bringing off-field behavior or the color of my hair into things, which, yes, of course, I'm massively embarrassed about. But that's neither here nor there. Judge me on my performance, and that's what I try and do as a pundit.
I just want to finish with a couple of pre-submitted questions from our members. Firstly, a question from James at Exeter College, Oxford. You've played with a lot of high-quality overseas players with Leinster during your career, the likes of Brad Thorne. Do you ever regret not moving abroad for a spell in the Premiership or top 14?
I did think about a move, never to the Premiership, but to the top 14. Just around the time that Leinster started developing, around 2006, we'd had 4 coaches in 4 years, and I was very frustrated. And I felt as though time was slipping away. So I really wanted to give myself a chance of some success. And it didn't feel as though that was going to be the case in Leinster until Michael Cheika came in 2006 and changed the mentality of our setup, sifted out the players that weren't going to be able to achieve that success. And then ultimately brought us our first European crown in 2009. So I feel as though the success that I had with Leinster would have meant a huge amount more rather than going to another club and to have had some success there. Yes, you'd have enjoyed it, but to have it with your hometown club or your home province is very rewarding. And I've obviously got you meet people in the street the whole time, and people talk fondly about different finals. It's lovely to have that regular association with people rather than having it in the south of France or wherever it might have been.
And lastly, a question from Matthew at St. Hughs College, Oxford. Which Tier 2 nations do you think will go on to emulate recent Japanese successes and close the gap with the traditional established rugby nations?
Good question. Yeah, I think the only way that they're going to do that is where Tier 2 nations, and we're trying to, I think there's a hope that we're going to remove the whole Tier 1, Tier 2 conversation, because straight away we're talking from a negative standpoint, about, lesser and greater. Let's just try and talk about level playing field and give them an opportunity to be able to get more games against better sides. The only way you progress is by listening and watching and hearing from people that know a little bit more. And you mentioned Brad Thorne. When he came in and imparted his knowledge, those players in the pack and second rows and forwards learned from his professionalism, and you can only get that from the best. And you only improve by realizing what the best are about, and sometimes having to be on the receiving end of a bad beating. And aesthetically, I know that doesn't look great from a world rugby point of view, but it's the only way that these emerging nations are going to get an opportunity to grow and develop and to improve. And there's nations like Georgia that are absolutely have a wealth of talent. It's just a matter of getting good quality coaching in there and giving them an opportunity to play against the best sides. But at times rugby can be a bit of a closed shop. We'll see what comes of it in the next 10 years, but hopefully there might be a little bit of a shake-up.
Perfect, thanks. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. I'm sure we could relive a lot of the Leinster moments for the rest of the day, but thank you so much for joining us. And I'm sure our members will be looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Well, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it. And stay safe, everyone.